The next thing that we're going to add to our page is we're going to create some web cards, and we will be, of course, making this area responsive as we've done in the past. So let's go ahead and create this new section. I'm going to come down underneath my carousel and I'll just make a comment so I can keep things organized. We'll start off by making a section. I'm going to give this an ID of animals, and we're going to make a class of bg-light, which will just make the background color slightly gray within this area. Inside here, I'm going to create a containing div, and inside this div, we'll start off by adding an h2. I'm going to give this a class of display-6, which will just make it not bold and slightly larger. And then we'll go ahead and type some text. Then I'll add a paragraph with a class of lead. And in addition to that, I'm going to add the text muted. And on the bottom, I'll add a little bit of margin. So we'll go ahead and add those classes, and then we'll just create some lorem ipsum text inside of that. Then what we're going to do still inside of this div is we're going to start to build out the web cards. Now I do want the web cards to display side by side, and I want them to be responsive. So I'm going to create a div with a class of row, and then we'll go ahead and we'll add the cards inside them. So each of my cards is going to consist of an article, and we're going to go ahead and add a class of card to these elements. I'm going to add the shadow class, which will give them a little bit of shadow. I'm going to give them some margin on the bottom. And then inside of these, we'll go ahead and we'll create an image. The images will need to have a class of card-image-top. And I'll point to the image that I want to show. And then after the image, we're going to create a div. This is going to need to have a class of card-body. And inside this, we will have a heading. I'll use an H5. This is going to have a class of card-title. And then we'll make a paragraph with a class of card-text. And that will contain some lorem ipsum. And then finally, after my paragraph closes, I'm going to make a button so that users can click it and learn more. This is going to have a couple classes. We're going to add the button class. We're going to use the button-info class, which will make the button teal. And then I want the text to be light. So I'm going to use text-light. And we are going to go ahead and just make this a null link for now. And I'll have this say read more. If we save and we refresh, you're going to see that this is what the card currently looks like. And of course, I just have one card, so it is going to expand and contract based on the size of my screen. Now, if we go ahead and we create several more articles, I'm just going to paste in the same article for right now so you can see what's happening. When I refresh my screen, I do have multiple articles, but they are just going to simply stack on top of each other. They're not going to ever appear side by side. So normally how we would circumvent this issue and resolve it would be to add some of our responsive classes. And if we go ahead and do this on the articles, I'm going to add a call-md-6 and a call-lg-4. This is going to ensure that the cards appear at 3 up at a large screen, 2 up at a medium-sized screen, and 1 up at the small screen. And you can see that my cards do go ahead and appear in that way. So at the large screen, we're getting 3 up. When my screen is more mid-size, I get 2 up. And then obviously when my screen is small, they're going to go to a 1-column layout. So this is working, but what I'd ultimately like is I want spacing between the cards. Normally, we would go ahead and apply a gutter spacing, but the gutter needs to be not on the actual element itself, but on the parent element. So if I come to row, for instance, and if I add a G4 and we refresh, you're going to see that we still don't get any change on our page. Unfortunately, when you're working with cards, because of how Bootstrap sets them up, we can't actually configure the page in this way. We need another element that is going to contain each of our articles. So I'm just going to get back to what I had before. And here I just have my one article inside of the row. I'm going to just cut this article really quickly. And then what we're going to do is we're going to add a div. And this div is going to have the column classes that we just talked about. So call-md-6 and call-lg-4. And then inside of this div, I'm going to place the card element. And basically every single card element now is going to need to reside inside of this particular div, not just the article. So if we just paste this in a couple more times, and if we save and we look in the browser, it is going to appear as we had it before, but now we get spacing in between these elements, which of course is a little bit more desirable. The layout looks much better. So just that one subtle change is going to allow you to create something a little bit more in line with what you are anticipating this look like. So let me just go ahead and populate the cards with a little bit of different content, because I do want to show you one other caveat that you probably are going to want to be aware of. So I'll just go ahead and restructure this slightly. So now I have 6 of these divs that contain the column classes, and inside of those we have the articles with the image and the description as we had created before. If we come back and we refresh our page, you're going to see that we have now 6 cards and they contain the variety of information. Now, the things that I wanted to point out is currently, because I did put different content inside each of the cards slightly, my cards are not equal in regards to height. And, maybe this isn't a problem in some situations, but I would rather have these all be equal in height. I think they look a little weird how they're kind of off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a class that is going to prevent this from happening. And this class is going to have to be added to all of the article elements. So I'm just going to go into all of my articles, and we're going to go ahead and add a class of h-100. When we save now and we refresh, the heights are going to be equal. So you can see that now all the heights are equal. We have lost our spacing between the cards. Let's go ahead and let's add gutters to our cards. So I'm going to come back up to my div with a class of row right here. And we're just going to go ahead and add a G-4, which will add the gutter spacing. And in addition, I'm going to add some padding to the right and the left, and I'm going to use padding of 4. So I'll use px-4, and if we refresh now, you can see that we recover that spacing between the cards, and the cards are all equal in regards to height. And clearly this is responsive, so at a large screen, the cards get bigger, but they'll never display more than in a 3-up configuration, and then when my page is more narrow, it'll go to a 2-up configuration, and then finally when the page is very narrow, we get a 1-up configuration. So in this way, we've gone ahead and created this card type layout and made it flexible, and we have the information all being somewhat consistent in regards to the height of the cards and the formatting of the information. Before we move on, I'm just going to make a quote area. So I'm going to come down here. I'll give this a comment of quote, and we're just going to go ahead and use a new section. We'll give this an ID of quote, and inside of the section, I'm going to create a container div, and let's add a little bit of margin on the top and the bottom. So I'm going to use my-4 just to create a little bit of spacing. And then inside, we're going to use our block quote element. This is going to have a class of block quote of text-center and of MB, which is margin bottom, of 0. And then we will go ahead and inside of this, we'll use our font awesome to generate a heart. And then I'm going to have a paragraph up here. And after the paragraph, we're going to make a block quote footer. So this is going to have a class of block quote dash footer. And let's also include a cite element. And just for usability, I'm going to give this a title attribute and value of source title. And if we go ahead and save this and refresh our page, you're going to see that we get this little quote. So when we use the class of block quote footer, it's going to treat the byline a little bit differently. And when we used our cite element, you can see how the text is going to appear italic, like so. And just to snug up the footer and the paragraph, I think I'll add a class of MB-1. There we go. That looks a little bit better. And then the final thing I'm going to do is on this section, let's add a class of bg-info, and we'll also add a class of text-light. And let's add some padding. So I'm going to just add padding all the way around of 4. And if we refresh, you can see how the area is now going to appear with this teal color. I need a little bit of spacing on the top and the bottom. So let's add margin on top and bottom of 5 just to separate that out. And then finally, I just need to recolor the elements that I have here. So I'm going to come to my heart and we're going to add a color of text light, and we're going to do the same thing on the footer. So let's go ahead and add a class of text light to this as well. And now if we refresh, our heart and our quote, everything is going to be white. And maybe our padding is a little much. Let's reduce this down to 2. And probably a little bit more spacing between our byline and our quote. All right, I think that looks pretty good. And this obviously is going to be responsive, as is everything on our page. So in this way, you can really customize these types of block quote areas, as well as adding our responsive cards that we just incorporated into our page.